Good morning, everyone. Really excited to be here to present to you about the story and the vision of Hip Hop Literacy 319. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'd like to say that the goal of this presentation is for whatever you may think about hip hop literacy or hip hop culture, that at the end of this presentation, that your thinking will be different. Again, we see things on the media and on television and lyrics and things that we find objectionable. But hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll see underneath it all is a culture of productivity and of youth motivation that can be very powerful, and that by the end we can have a conversation about what ways can we maximize the learning that young people can experience through this approach. So I'm calling this Hip Hop Literacy 319, the story and future of education. Now, the story of Hip Hop Literacy 319 really begins with Dr. Al Hayes, a emeritus professor at the University of Northern Iowa, who after he retired, he was working with his partner and colleague for community programs rather, and she had convinced him that what the community needed was a literacy program that was rooted in African American culture. And so he went along with that and raised money for it, and then reached out to the University of Northern Iowa Literacy Education Department to find colleagues who would be interested in participating and collaborating with them. It turned out I was the only one who responded and followed through with interest. And so when I met with them, I was telling them about a program that I had been a part of at the University of Delaware, where I was previously, and a project that was the dissertation project for a doctoral student, which was based on hip hop culture. And at the end of the dissertation project, after the young people graduated from high school, every single one of them went on to college. And so they heard that story, and they said that they would love if we would be able to do that here. And so Hip Hop Literacy 319 was born. Now, the program began in the basement of a church, Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Waterloo. And, I have to say that when we had the program in Delaware, I was very peripheral. All I really was a dissertation advisor. I kind of observed the doctoral student carrying out everything, and he had an extensive hip hop background. He was a certified teacher, but at the same time, he was a professional music producer. He had been a professional DJ. He knew the culture inside and out. He'd been engaging in educational applications of hip hop since he was a teenager. And so he had a great deal of experience to bring to the project, and that's what he brought. And he kind of knew what to do and how things worked and how to work with the kids. He knew the technology, and he was a part of this, we'll talk about later, this hip hop ecosystem. He knew where to find artists and how to bring them together to help produce the music that the kids were going to compose and record. And so he had all that background knowledge. I, on the other hand, had none of it. The way the program started was that there was a basketball coach at East High School in Waterloo who happened to be, an employee of the university. And when he found out about the hip hop literacy program that I was trying to get started at the time, he got excited and approached me and said that I have a freshman point guard who's my starting point guard is a freshman, so he's very talented athletically, and he loves hip hop. And I'd love for you to meet him, and so that he can have a positive hip hop outlet and not, get caught up into something which he feared would lead his star point guard into trouble over time. And so he invited me to attend a practice, and I was attending the practice, and it was kind of a conditioning session. And while the team was working out and going through various conditioning routines, they were playing his music over the sound system. And so he had the apparatus to engage in recording. And so he was my primary hip hop contact at that point. And he was, again, he was like 15 years old. He was young, but he had a very positive attitude. And to this day, I'm amazed that, someone his age could have been as responsible and reliable as he was over time. Always where he needed to be, always very positive and inspiring. And so he's now a very successful businessman. And so just to have, kind of known him as a young teenager and worked with him was a tremendous experience. But he had some basically rudimentary recording equipment in his bedroom. And that became, the initial recording equipment that we used to make music in that first inaugural summer session of Hip Hop Literacy 319. And so just to give you a sense of the difference between doing a program like this on the East Coast in the state of Delaware, where Delaware by no means is a hip hop hotbed, but at the same time, it's close to places that are. So it's about 45 minutes from Philadelphia, about 2 hours from New York City, an hour and a half from Washington, D.C. And so these young Delaware kids were surrounded by areas where they could look and see young people like themselves engaging in hip hop, music. And so they felt that, they had the attitude, well, all I need to do is get recorded, share my music, and someone's going to find me and I'm going to be a superstar. And so the program in Delaware actually got started when a classroom teacher observed what's called freestyle rapping, which is, and it's kind of legendary in lunchrooms across the country, where she was on lunch duty and she saw, one person kind of bangs out a beat on the table, and on that steady beat, people begin to improvisationally compose rhymes and kind of compete with one another to see who can compose the most creative rhymes. And it's often in a battling way where they're kind of making up insults for, against each other, and then the crowd gathers around and they're cheering on the competitors. And so she observed this during lunch period and saw that, wow, to do that requires a great deal of language talent. And it's language talent that they aren't, really displaying in the classroom. So she reached out to me because she was taking a doctoral seminar with me at the time. And she was, wondering, what can we do to take this language talent and connect it to a classroom, to something that would be more acceptable for classroom practice. And so, I began to work with her on that. And I had experience not with hip hop, but with spoken word poetry. And so she gathered these young men together in a class. And she kind of funny, she said, when she asked to create a special class with these particular students, the teachers and administrators, looked at her like she was crazy, because they had, they said, you want all of them? You want these all together at the same time in a class? And so, because usually they're getting in trouble. But, we gathered them together, and basically I gave them a writing prompt about dreams. And so I think I had Langston Hughes' poem, A Dream Deferred. I think I had Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream. And then there was a passage of a poem by one of their heroes, Tupac Shakur. And I asked them just to respond and just write whatever comes to their mind as it relates to dreams. And within a minute or two, they had these very sophisticated, poetic, complex, not rhymes, but just poems that they had written. And I'll never forget one of the lines, the young man wrote, I look around the pictures in my house and I see where I get my nose and my mouth. And he was writing about the fact that he was an orphan. And all he had was pictures of his parents, and he didn't really have a relationship with them. And so we were just blown away that in such a very short time they were able to compose these poems. And it turns out that they had memorized these poems almost instantaneously. And anytime somebody walked in the room, they would start sharing these poems. And, needless to say, people were just blown away and very impressed by what they had done. And so this teacher was so inspired because she knew that they wanted to record hip hop more than anything else. So she wrote a grant and received the grant, $5,000 to purchase recording equipment. Now she didn't know, what to do with this equipment or how to use it. But I had, been on a recruiting trip to Florida State University and found this doc student named, now he's Dr. Tony Anderson out of Columbus, Ohio. And he was a certified teacher and a professional music producer. And he knew what to do. So I introduced him to the teacher, and the kids, and then he turned it into his dissertation project. And so, he kind of knew exactly, what steps needed to be taken to actually, put this all together. And so when the teacher, got the equipment and they figured out how to use it, instead of just the kids that we were working with who had, kind of been the battle rappers and who were involved in hip hop, she opened the studio up, the classroom up, so that the entire school could have an opportunity to perform. And so when she opened that, classroom up, there was literally a line of students from one end of the school to the other to get in for an opportunity to record for a couple of minutes on this equipment because they all felt that they were going to be superstars. By contrast, here in the Midwest, in small town Iowa, we asked the kids to record and they looked at us like we were crazy. They liked hip hop music. They, would, listen to it all the time, but the whole idea that they would record was something totally foreign to them. So we had a lot of work to do in terms of actually creating a program. And I'll never forget, there was one young lady who ultimately was voted, the top student for that first summer. And when she started off, she refused to face anybody as she was recording. The microphone had to be set up in a corner, and she had to face the wall in order for us to let her, be recorded. And so there was this world of difference between East Coast Delaware and Midwest Iowa when it came to kind of introducing hip hop and education. But a breakthrough occurred when, after a couple of years in the program, of running the program, there's a professional musician and studio owner in the area who produces hip hop music. He heard about our program and he approached us and offered, to allow us to record in his professional studio. And that was a tremendous breakthrough. And he not only offered the studio, but then he produced professional hip hop tracks that we were able to purchase and integrate into the program. And so that, represented a real breakthrough because hip hop operates, as I said earlier, through an ecosystem. There's a collective of artists that are engaged in this practice of producing hip hop music and other cultural commodities and artifacts. And it's profoundly collaborative. No one really just makes hip hop just by themselves in isolation. It's through becoming a part of that culture. And so basically by starting this program and working with kids, word got out of what we were doing. And so the culture recognized us and reached out and incorporated us. And the studio led to, I'd say, three major learning breakthroughs for the students. One was, as you can see, the studio is a professional environment. This is not the basement of the church that they're familiar with or the rudimentary recording equipment. This looks like the kind of environment that they see when they're watching music videos. And it's run as such. So it's a professional recording studio. When the students are recording, they're not interacting with, teachers or other educators. They're interacting with professional technicians and engineers who are used to working with professional artists. And so when they get in there, and I'll never forget, on one occasion there was a young man, he was bragging about what he was going to do when he was going to record and how good he was going to be, and he was kind of being loud and disruptive. And he got to record, and he, was kind of being immature. And the person running the session basically said, "No, you have to come back and get your attitude together." And so they had a firsthand experience of being in an environment where professional conduct is a standard of expectation. And so everything that the teachers are trying to enforce about your behavior and your cooperation and your professionalism, now that became real all of a sudden. And far from being discouraged, that young man, was disappointed that he didn't get to record that day, but he made sure that next time we got in the studio, he was on his P's and Q's, and he was doing everything that he needed to do, in terms of conduct, to be able to record his track. And so the others saw that, so that was a major breakthrough learning lesson of professionalism and professional conduct that the students had because they were in a professional environment. The other learning benefit from the studio came because the students were, again, intimidated. They'd kind of gotten used to just being in the basement and being with the rudimentary equipment, but here they are in this professional studio, and that created a very powerful learning experience in that it made them extra nervous. They had, written their lyrics, they prepared, reciting their lyrics to the rhythm of the background track, and some of them had even memorized their lyrics, so they were prepared. But when it came time to go into that recording booth and get behind that microphone, they got scared. And so then that kind of launched us as a staff into what I call a pedagogy of encouragement. You got this. You prepared. You're going to be all right. And so that kind of gave them the courage to at least give it a shot. And then when they were successful, they had that breakthrough experience of confronting their fears, overcoming their doubts and self-doubt and hesitation, listening to the educators who had their best interests at heart, and experiencing that success. And then that success was taken to another level when they actually heard themselves professionally rendered by this basically state-of-the-art recording technology that rendered their voice, their words, the music that they recorded to, indistinguishable in quality from, the kind of music that they hear on the radio. So that just gave them just a profound sense of accomplishment that then set them on another level as it related to their motivation for engaging in the program. So once they overcame their fears and then they heard themselves, next thing you know, they're coming up with more lyrics, asking for opportunities to share their work and record. I brag that, I'm close to 60 years old, and I think I have more text messages and communication with teenagers than probably any, 59-year-old in the state of Iowa, because they're reaching out. They want to record. They're letting me know, they need a ride. So all these different things related to getting in that studio. I now have, communication with teenagers on a consistent basis because of their motivation to, experience the studio and to have their music professionally rendered. Now, the third breakthrough occurred and is related to the studio in the sense that, as word got out that, okay, hip hop literacy is, producing this, this very impressive music, at, I think, our third final showcase that we have every year, a showcase of the music that the students have produced that summer, was attended by upper level administrators from the Waterloo School District. And they were so impressed by what they saw and what they heard that they approached us about collaborating with them on a summer program so that it would be literally a hip hop summer school. And this took the program to another level, in that I think that, I still don't know of formal collaboration between a school district and a hip hop program for the purpose of education. And so at that time, that was truly kind of revolutionary. And now, hip hop is, more kind of accepted, but I don't know of a summer school program where curriculum's developed and promoted and supported by the school district in the manner that, we were able to achieve, in our program. And then perhaps the biggest benefit was that it brought us into collaboration with, the person who is now the co-director of hip hop literacy, Lamont Muhammad, who has a fascinating story in that he's a hip hop artist in his own right. He's a certified classroom teacher, and he's a children's book author because he developed a practice of writing hip hop music for his students and then turning the lyrics of those songs that he wrote for his students into children's books. And so he has a number of children's books, but also he deals with, and the children's books are written in part because he was a ward of the foster care system, where he didn't have his parents in his life, and he was struggling with that, and so he didn't have the role models and the support that he needed, and he felt that hip hop, was kind of his teacher. And so through the lyrics of, especially back in the 80s and early 90s, you had socially conscious hip hop that promoted Black pride and Black achievement, and he would listen to those lyrics and take them very seriously. And he felt that those gave him the mentoring and instruction that he didn't have in real life. And so his children's books are also a vehicle for providing that kind of mentoring for students who are lacking those important foundations of support in their lives. And so he, just jumped at the opportunity to be the co-director of hip hop literacy and has never looked back. And now he himself is a doctoral student doing his dissertation on hip hop and writing identity, because he's recognized that once students start writing hip hop, then they have that identity of writers, which they often don't, necessarily achieve through classroom instruction. And so he's kind of, doing a study which is looking at the writing identity, writerly identity that's developed, by hip hop, literacy students. And so, that breakthrough was very important. And so along with the high quality music that we were producing, during the time of our first collaboration with the schools, we started publishing our music online through SoundCloud, which many of you are familiar with is a global music sharing platform. And we purchased a data package, and you can see a diagram from that package, which kind of lays out not only how many times the songs have been listened to, and this is after the first week of recording in one of the summers. You see not only how many times the songs have been listened to, but you see where the people listening to them are residing, and specifically which people are listening to it. But I want to direct your attention to the middle where it says United States, and you see the number 108, and below that you see the different countries around the world where people have listened to the students' music. You see India, Colombia, Korea, El Salvador, and Spain. And then at the bottom it says 22 other countries. And so we are literally able to show these students in small town Iowa that people from all over the world are listening to your music. And it recalls a very famous lyric in hip hop, by the legendary artist Rakim, who said, "It's not where you're from, it's where you're at." And so again, if you have the consciousness of being able to, produce music, and then the platforms and the technology to share it globally, people around the world are going to be consuming your music. And that led to perhaps our greatest breakthrough, because there was a curator of an international leisure festival sponsored by the World Leisure Organization, who happened to hear the music, and he had a connection in Iowa, and he was, curious about our music because at this leisure festival, they wanted U.S. hip hop artists, and they didn't really know how to get them, but he heard our music and had the connection. And then he reached out, and basically we received a preliminary invitation to perform in China. And it was truly, an amazing, kind of breakthrough. And they wanted to see some performance footage, just to, to confirm our invitation. We sent some footage. Actually, the curator worked out of Hungary. We sent him, the footage to Hungary. He loved what he saw and gave us a formal invitation to perform in China, which we did in the fall of 2018. And so because we had this global platform and are part of this global ecosystem, and we had, recorded, that availed the students to international travel and a powerful experience in China. And so this particular photo represents a tremendous victory because, as you might imagine, the whole idea of these small town East Waterloo kids going to China was just off the radar as related to anything that anybody imagined for these young people. And so it was met with excitement on the part of very few people, but it was skepticism, doubt, and even fear on the part of many people. And so, people were saying, what are you going to do when you get there? None of you all speak Chinese. And, this is dangerous. And at the time, this is before the virus, obviously. Geopolitically, we were in conflict with China related to trade issues. And so China was being portrayed in the media as this dangerous place that's hostile to Americans. So that even added to the sense that we were endangering the young people by having them go to China. And so that just led to just a lot of misinformation that I had to deal with. But then everybody that I had spoken to who had actually attended that festival had the same story. Once you get there, they're going to take care of everything. They're wonderful hosts. They're going to make sure that you have everything you need. And, any concerns about safety are the least of concerns that you have when you get there, to the festival. And so since I heard that single note from everybody who actually attended the festival, I decided to press on regardless of, what other people were saying around me. And this particular picture kind of embodies the victory because in the middle you see a young Chinese woman holding a USA sign. So as you might imagine, we arrive at our destination. We're on the other side of the world in China. We arrive at our destination. We go through the familiar, routine of getting off the plane, getting our bags, and outside of baggage claim waits the unknown. And so I have no idea what we're going to experience, past this point. We let people know our arrival time, but just in terms of having never been to this, conference or festival and knowing anything firsthand, it was just a tremendous amount of unknown. And so we walk through the doors of baggage claim, and there's that young lady holding that sign that says USA, speaking English, willing and ready to do and provide whatever we need. And so from the time we arrived to the time we left, which was actually a day and a half after the festival was over, they just took care of us, gave us everything, and she accompanied us. And so April was just somebody that none of the people who travel will ever forget because of how she took care of us during our trip to China. And then we had no idea once we got there the extent to which the demand for U.S. hip hop performers. Hangzhou is a very large city in U.S. terms, especially compared to Iowa. So you've got about 4 million people, and they kind of distributed the acts that were part of the festival in all different parts of the city. And so they had paired us with a hip hop dance group from Hungary and a Russian dance group, kind of traditional Russian dance group, and then placed us in a Chinese fashion and beauty expo, which was televised throughout that region of China. And so all of a sudden we found ourselves in this huge production with all these lights, and as you'll see in the next photo, there's this digital backdrop behind us, with all of this pyrotechnics and stuff going, and we're just like, it's like Las Vegas all of a sudden. And what was really amazing was that the performers in our group were as young as 10. And I just, thought of myself at 10 years old, being halfway around the world, and all of a sudden I'm in this huge production, and I would have just been paralyzed with fear. But these kids, they stepped up and gave their best performance. They just, became, they were like celebrities there because people wanted to see U.S. hip hop artists. And so literally, the other groups from the other countries were following them around, wanting to get their picture taken with them. There's a large crowd at this performance. There were people even standing on the outside of the performance venue trying to get in to see the performance. And so they were just, we're just astounded by the response to, U.S. hip hop on the part of this international festival. And so here you see all of the performers, and then you see the digital backdrop to this particular performance stage. And then we were just tremendously honored because after this performance, which was one of the closing performances of the festival, the organizer of the festival from China, and so China, puts the money out, for this festival on an annual basis. They even have a festival site where most of the activities take place. So this is literally written into the civic life of Hangzhou, China. And he said that, he appreciated our performance and our conduct through the festival so much that we had a standing invitation to perform in this festival for as long as they have it. So that just gives you a sense of the accomplishment, representing not only Iowa, but the United States and hip hop through this experience and the level of achievement that we had. So just want to close with just, kind of bringing us to a point of discussion where we can kind of step back and think about what it takes to go from the basement of a church in 2014, where students are facing the wall because they can't bear to be looked at while they're recording, to being on the stage across the world in China, and so just the learning, that required, and the growth and the vision, and then to see that we're part of this learning culture with a global ecosystem. And so if you're participating in hip hop to continue to be a participant and a productive member of the culture, you have to learn. You have to grow as an artist. You have to develop. That is a fundamental fact of hip hop cultural life. And so I think that the learning implications really come out in the research of social psychologists Leib and Wenger when they talk about learning coming through participation. And I think this is where we get into the larger, broader applicability of hip-hop literacy, because it's one where the learning takes place through this participation, which they talk about, participate in a community of practitioners, and that leads to a mastery of knowledge and skill. And so, as we all know, we're in a generation where young people can pretty much do what they want to do in terms of media production immediately. They don't have to wait. I remember, the whole idea of recording, you had to be a special artist and get access to special studio environments, or it just wasn't going to happen. And so, but that's not the case anymore. Little kids, my son is 8 years old. He has all kinds of YouTube heroes where they're producing music and they're making movies and they're making videos and they have channels and they're celebrities and it's out of their own home. So, we're seeing, this, so their expectation now is to do. They're not going to sit in the classroom and wait for something to happen. They're going to want to, to do it now and to learn on the job, so to speak. And so that creates a number of challenges for us as educators, to think about how can we maximize this new disposition. And so just to kind of share with you just the hip hop literacy composition process is kind of very simple, but very effective in terms of creating motivated, independently minded artists. And so it begins with selecting that background track, which in hip hop parlance is called the beat. So you hear hip hop artists talk about the beat, they're talking about the background track. And that's where, again, that's, more important than the lyrics in many cases, because that's the sound, that's the rhythm. And when it comes to actually motivating students for reading and writing and using their literacy skills, this perhaps is the most important detail, because it transforms writing from this solitary, pencil and paper activity that you do by yourself and you kind of do it within your own head, to this dynamic, multimedia, musical kind of envisioning process where the beat plays and they're imagining themselves not only writing their lyrics but sounding a certain way. So the writing process now has a sound attached to it, and they imagine themselves with that sound, and that's where the beat has to kind of move them, emotionally, and then that brings out the words and the lyrics, and the whole envisioning process that they have for themselves begins, and it begins crystallizing once the beat is selected. And so once they select the beat, then you see this, writing the bars. And this is and so the term bars in hip hop can be looked at as the equivalence of a line of poetry or a stanza of poetry, but it's actually much more than that. Bars is a celebration in hip hop terms of good writing. And so once they have their beat selected and they got that sound in their head, and often, in our composition process, we're playing the beat, while they write. And so you see this level of focus and attention in the summertime when their peers are out playing basketball or video games, whatever the case may be. They're focused, intently on writing their bars. And one of the highest compliments that you can get, from a peer in hip hop is if somebody tells you, "Oh, you got bars," or somebody's telling somebody else, "He's got bars." That means he's got good writing. So that means he's not only just, rhyming, he's able to use words creatively, he's able to use the words in a way that's going to move people emotionally, and he captures people's attention with the words. And so that means he's got bars, or she's got bars. And so that is a very important part of this composition process. Then, as we've discussed before, recording in the studio. Just getting the opportunity to get in that studio, get behind the mic. Here you have a group that's recording their chorus together, and they're excited and they're motivated and they're just doing their thing in there. So that becomes a point of motivation, as we discussed earlier. And then their performance. So at the end of every summer, we have this huge performance, which is advertised, and it's usually just capacity crowd in the gym where the school is located, and they just have a tremendous experience. And so now through this, and then finally, got one part, this had to be adjusted as everything else for the year 2020. And so you see social distance, you see the mask, you even see gloves. And what it, most importantly for our purposes, it required that instead of working as a group, because you see through the studio, this is a group that's working together, and each person is contributing a verse to an overall song, and they're recording the hook of that song together. But this year required that instead of working as a group, that you work as individual artists. And they identified, and so instead of the topic being given to them and the beat being kind of them, beat being that they select the beat, together, they do all of this on an individual term, and they did it by themselves. And they really took to that opportunity to be individual artists, to the point where in one recording session, we had 9 songs recorded, which had never happened before. And so, this process is culminated in, the program having these talented, motivated, individually oriented artists that can just produce in collaboration with other artists. And to me, there's just a tremendous amount of learning potential that's that kind of has arisen, from this process. So I just want us to think about, okay, one other thing I just forgot was that we also now have a radio station that produces, that kind of shares our music, online radio station 24 hours a day. If you look up what's called Young Artist Radio Network, Google that, and that will take you to the page where you can see the network page, and then there'll be a link there where you can listen to the students' music. And so again, that's another outlet of learning. So it gets into the marketing, how radio stations work, and the business of music. All these now become learning vehicles and opportunities for the students in the program. And then finally, for our conversation, I'd like for us to think about how can we maximize the learning for the students, because again, it's not this individual effort or endeavor. It's not just the school, the whole community, because you have young people producing art that can be shared and can be used and mobilized strategically for different purposes. Not only can the students' music be a benefit to the community, but it creates many learning experiences for the students themselves. So how can we as a community think about maximizing the learning through this type of process? So thank you very much. I look forward to our conversation and really getting some insights into drawing from your professional backgrounds as we consider hip-hop literacy and maximizing the learning of the heart of the students. Thank you very much.